Good morning, everyone. It is always good to be in the house of the living God and to share a few moments in worship with one another. I am honored to have a word or two or three to say this morning. And I want to thank whoever was principally responsible for my standing up here today, in addition to God. Thanks to Sandra and our admissions offices and to all of you who are present, and especially gratitude for those who are here for our exploratory days, visiting, checking us out, determining whether or not we are worthy. I want to assure you that we are very worthy. We look forward to engaging you and being with you these next 2 days. You have heard the scriptures in your hearing, and if we may take now a moment to pray. Creator of the universe, sustenance of life itself, maker of our days, before and within you, we lift our hearts in praise. All that we have and all that we are is owed to you. The shortcomings of our existence, the fullness of our lives, the good, the bad, and the otherwise, you have overseen it all, and you have given us life, and you have loved us still. Take us now, O God, into the depths of thy presence, and feed us till we want no more. Hear our prayer, O God. Be thou the answer to our deepest needs. Amen. Title, my message you have before you, always there are the children. Soweto is an abbreviation for the southwestern townships, the all-black township area adjacent Johannesburg, South Africa, where racial discrimination has long found brutal state sanction under the former apartheid regime. Once the largest city in South Africa, with an estimated population of some 3 million, until 1976, the inhabitants of Soweto were classified in their own country as temporary residents, and then classified only when they served as the workforce for the white people of Johannesburg. Under apartheid, whites were guaranteed a free, quality education. Blacks were required to pay for a disfranchising education. The Bantu educational system, as it was called, was systematically designed to perpetuate injustice, to deny the human dignity of black people. Beginning on June 16, 1976, the children of Soweto boycotted classes in protest against the South African government's decree that Afrikaans, the language of the oppressor, was now made compulsory. For 5 weeks, the children marched peacefully against the suppression of their freedoms, against government without representation, against the terror of tyranny, until tear gas fired by the police set the streets ablaze. The children retaliated with sticks, stones, bottles, and any other projectiles they could find. Bullets rang out from police guns, and like dominoes, the children fell. In the aftermath, more than 1,000 people were killed, many of them children. Since 1991, the children of Soweto, since 1991, the children of Soweto and June 16th have been commemorated as the International Day of the African Child. The arrival of the Central American caravan on the U.S. southern borders in April of this year once again turned our nation's fragile political attention to the plight of individuals and families, and especially the children who have traveled thousands of miles in search of asylum and refugee status and new beginnings. It is pre-dawn. The village of San Jose in El Salvador is still asleep. Its peaceful existence is broken by the sound of heavy trucks, and jeeps pulling into the center of the settlement. Government soldiers set to their task, tearing apart houses, burning homes and gardens, shredding everything, destroying furniture, shooting livestock, getting rid of clothing. The air is dark with smoke. In a country once ravaged by a lengthy civil war, unspeakable atrocities, and the displacement of entire communities, the tentacles of armed criminal actors, from drug cartels to gangs, today complement illicit state actions. Over the last decade, the number of children traveling from El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras to the United States, and to a lesser extent, Mexico, Panama, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, and Belize, has only continued to rise. Untold numbers of people continue to disappear and be killed in Central and South America and worldwide to this day. In Nigeria, the abducted girls of Boko Haram and the Myanmar decimation of its Rohingya Muslim citizenry are two cases in point. The cost exacted by violence is a horrific legacy that extends into the workplace and the home. Human rights violations in society, domestic violence in the home, children in situations fraught with harm and danger, fleeing deprivation and death, seeking security and protection, looking for a safe haven. Sometimes these children are on the run, unoccupied, and unaccompanied. Latinx and other people of color being apprehended by U.S. immigration authorities at ports of entry, having traversed oceans, crossed the Rio Grande, profiled in the desert, in public spaces, along the borderlands, in work site raids. If they are not deported, they are confined as non-citizens in detention complexes, in incarcerated spaces. Children and parents are separated, entire families are re-traumatized. Communities are upended and lives are irreparably damaged. There is no safe return to one's country of origin, not for many of these people. In the words of 17-year-old Kevin, quote, "My grandmother is the one who told me to leave. She said, if you don't join, the gangs will shoot you. If you do, the rival gang or the cops will shoot you. But if you leave, no one will shoot you." On August 28th of this year, Greta Thunberg arrived on the shores of Lower Manhattan after a 15-day voyage, crossing the Atlantic in an emissions-free yacht. As the 16-year-old Swedish climate justice activists sailed past the Statue of Liberty. At Dockside, youthful climate activists were heard to chant, "The seas levels are rising, and so are we." Last year, Greta began skipping classes to stand outside the Swedish parliament to demand that her government take action and confront the climate crisis. This is why it's only 90 degrees today. Last month, she took to the streets of New York with other students, climate striking outside the United Nations and delivering a powerful rebuke to world leaders at the United Nations Climate Action Summit, declaring, quote, "You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words." Greta's protests have sparked a global movement of student strikes for change. Her own protests, she said, were inspired by United States students who staged walkouts to demand better gun control in response to mass school shootings and the politicization of loss of life. Last year, flying under the US radar, 13-year-old Autumn Peltier, an Anishinaabe member of the Wikwemikong First Nation, also addressed world leaders at the United Nations, having already famously confronted Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on his support for oil pipelines and silence on clean water protections. 2 weeks ago, Autumn passionately and fabulously known as the Water Warrior, and having been named the Chief Water Commissioner of her people, was nominated for an International Children's Peace Prize. I have heard countless of us say it. Shannon, where's Shannon? I first heard Shannon say it, I've been hearing it ever since. The world is on fire in the decimation of our earth, in the rapid approach of global heating, in the intense blazes of Amazonia, in the rising of the seas, in freshwater shortages, in the spread of disease, in the escalation of climate refugees, in sexual violence, trafficking, and rape, in extreme poverty, in urban food and healthcare deserts, with human aiding and abetting. The world is on fire. This is no metaphor. In our children and in our youth, in the courageousness of their lives, in the midst of devastation sometimes being rained down upon them, the world's voiceless have found a voice. The Spirit of God is being poured out, made imminent and become manifest, with real world impact in the seismic reorientation of our consciousness for a more just and humane world, a safe energy economy, one shared earth. In our text from Matthew for this morning, when the disciples came to Jesus inquiring, "Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" Jesus called a child to him and simply says, "Whoever turns and becomes like children." In our day and time, it is sometimes hard to be optimistic about the human condition, to speak provocatively about our role as theological learners and educators, about the value of a seminary education, of faith-seeking understanding, of ministry preparation for mind, body, and spirit. To believe that as humans, we are sometimes able to understand that we are made for one another, with a magnificent capacity for goodness, to dream dreams, to see visions, to realize community. We do not have to be optimistic, I am not seeking Pollyanna here, but we can be clear. We can begin by asking ourselves some difficult questions that I think are profoundly theological. We need to ask ourselves what is right rather than what is expedient. What is human that is alien to us? What is to be gained by exacting human suffering in an unsustainable world? Know the difference between bigotry and greed, the root cause and the cure. About the poisonous consequences of our indifference and inactions. Be careful to avoid the captivity of the mind, the spirit, and the will. Always in our theological preparations, we can be careful about accommodating to second-rate goals and second-hand ideas. We are humans, created in the divine image. Surely we have discovered by now what the smallest child can see. How short-sighted is this whole business of generating unbridled wealth at the sacrifice of priceless values? How senseless is our refusal to see that all peoples all over the world, in their own cultures and in their own right, are consequential, beautiful, different, and equal. Theological education at its best invites us to engage in visionary thinking about the life of the moral mind, the meaning of the body physical, and the flourishing of spirit in community, even and especially in a day and age that is increasingly dangerous to our health. In the midst of our varied sectarianism, what we encounter and what we encourage, we are still invited by the one who is known as the Ancient of Days to lessen suffering, to be seekers after truth, to take action, to raise the bar of human and earthly expectation, to do a work worthy of life itself. For you, our friends, who are sitting to my left, visiting on these exploratory days, please know that Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary is a caring and visionary living and learning community that seeks to bear witness to some of the most pressing urgencies of our day. At LPTS, we encourage ethical reflection in a xenophobic world and social engagement that takes seriously the imperatives of the divine, the need to treat people kindly, with civility, to welcome the stranger, to break every shackle, to set people free, to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with God are among our chiefest joys. The skeptic will say, it is not the responsibility of the seminary to interpret its mission in the concrete, to dare translate injustice and poverty and hatred and greed into grace and beauty and harmony and joy. It is not our mission to free the caged bird that sings, to model, however imperfectly, the gifts of faith, hope, and love. But I want to hear you, if we're not hearing anything else today, know this: we are the children of God. And God's children all over the world are depending on us to choose a more excellent way, to make amends for our transgressions, to forge a new future for them and for we ourselves while there is yet time. the young. Challenge us to give them a chance to grow up and perchance to grow old. Always there are the children, our future present, beautifully human, learning from us, bearing witness more than we are able. One of my favorite poets, fellow Fiskite Nikki Giovanni. Yay, yay. Said the same thing. And I'm reading from her poem. Always there are the children. And always there are the children. There will be children in the heat of day. There will be children in the cold of winter. Children, like a quilted blanket, are welcomed in our old age. Children, like a block of ice to a desert sheik, are a sign of status in our youth. We feed the children with our culture that they might understand our travail. We nourish the children on our faiths that they may understand respect. We urge the children on the tracks that our race will not fall short. But children are not ours. They are not ours, nor are we theirs. They are our future. We are past. How do we welcome the future? Not with the colonialism of the past, for that is our problem. Not with the racism of the past, for that is their problem. Not with the fears of our own status, for history is lived, not dictated. We welcome the young of all groups as our own with the solid nourishment of food and warmth. We prepare the way with the solid nourishment of self-actualization. We implore all the young to prepare for the young, because always there will be children. And the people of God